So, if you are in a position of asking how much is enough, we're going to answer the question today for you because I think this question really lies heavy on many people's hearts, especially people who are in business and wanting to do the best thing with their lives and make great decisions, especially who are wanting to be there for their families and their children. And they're wondering over this question of how much is enough. And should I continue putting my effort and my attention into making money? Today, we have a great conversation queued up for you. Joining us back for eighth episode together, I believe, is Rabbi Daniel Lapin. So, Rabbi, thank you so much for joining us again for the Money Advantage podcast.
As you know, you never have to twist my arm to join you guys. It's so wonderful to chat with you.
Excellent. Well, Bruce, we're really excited for this conversation today. So Rachel Marshall and Bruce Wayner, your normal, regular co-hosts here on the show, The Money Advantage. Today, we're talking about something that actually, Rabbi, you brought to us. You said, hey, how do you think through this question? And very specifically, if somebody was to really ask this question of, I'm working and I'm making money, and I want to make sure that I'm not overworking, and I want to make sure that, how do I know when enough is enough? How do I know if money making or making money is encompassing all too much of my effort and my attention and is a concern when I should be happy with what I have and move on? So I want to just give a little introduction to Rabbi Lapin before we dive into this question on the show today. First, if this is the first time you've been exposed to Rabbi Daniel Lapin, you're in for a treat. I would love to hear if you have heard of him before or read any one of his books. Some are on the shelf somewhere behind me. Thou Shall Prosper. We've got also Business Secrets from the Bible, Holistic You, and those are just a few. I'm going to give you a little bit of his background because he is somebody that you need to know and follow in the world of understanding really what money is all about, but also understanding it from a biblical perspective. So Rabbi Lapin is an author, a speaker, a TV host. He immigrated to the United States from South Africa after studying mathematics, physics, and economics in Israel and the UK. You're going to hear from all of those backgrounds the depth of wisdom that he brings to the table. Some of his 7 books are many I've already mentioned, also America's Real War, and they've all been translated into Chinese and Korean. So that's something that you're impacting cultures beyond just the United States as well. You're a frequent speaker for trade groups, political and civic organizations, financial conferences and companies in the US, Europe, and Asia, regularly guesting on radio and television shows. Newsweek magazine included you in its first list of America's 50 most influential rabbis. And you've definitely been an influential rabbi in my life. I don't have any other rabbis in my life, but you are it. So I really appreciate that. And so you and your wife, Susan, who we have had the wonderful pleasure of meeting as well, host the daily TCT television show, Ancient Jewish Wisdom. And so really, Rabbi Lapin is here to bring that ancient Jewish wisdom for modern times and help us to unpack some of life's most difficult and pressing questions. And so that's what we're going to be doing today, talking about money. What is enough? What is satisfaction? What is balance? What is it to settle or to learn to be happy with? What is growth? These concepts are going to be all packed in today. So Rabbi, let's hear from your perspective before we kind of dive into these topics.
Well, Rachel and Bruce, our second daughter delighted us when she was in she stopped homeschooling and went to high school for 10th grade. And when she got there, her first report was all A's. And this is not unusual for homeschoolers who go to regular school. They find it very easy. They find it taking far too much time for too little return. And that was her case. And so she had no trouble getting A's across. And then the next report came, and it was mostly B's with a sprinkling of C's. And then the report after that was B's and a sprinkling of C's. And that was how it continued till she graduated. And we asked her what happened the first time. And again, Susan and I have never been overly aggressive or infatuated with grades. I'm not impressed with credentials. I'm not impressed with experts, and and we really didn't care. But she said, "Oh, when I got A's, I realized I was spending too much time on schoolwork and obviously not enough time on all my other interests. So A's served to me as a warning sign that I'm not balancing my time. And
Mm.
that's why I lowered it to B's. Now, if I got too many C's, I thought, okay, fine, I'll up it again. But B's are exactly where I want to be. I don't want A's because I'm not interested in that kind of exchange. So that's a little bit similar to the question you're asking, accepting money and not grades.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, is there a point at which you should say, yeah, you know what, I think I'm doing fine, and it means I'm not allocating enough time to other things? Well, this is actually a very difficult question. It's not a difficult question to answer, but it's a difficult question to answer in a way that doesn't indict me.
Mm-hmm. Or any one of us on the show, because we talk about money on a regular basis. And what's really interesting about this is that you can look at money from a healthy perspective and concern yourself with serving others and making more of it, and that being a wonderful pursuit, and not wanting to step out of that. You also need to recognize that there are other components of your life, and you balance this so nicely when you look across the work that you have, that there are other areas of your life that you also want to make sure that you have attended to, and that those are thriving as well. Those might be your home relationships, your children. Are you spending enough time with your family? Are you investing in those relationships? Are you working to the detriment of something else? Is your health suffering because you're doing the grind and you're just pushing and pushing and pushing in business? But that's why this question is something I think that really rests on so many of our minds and hearts, because we want to make sure we're not just doing something that seems good on the surface, but then it's really handicapping us or crippling our impact and our effort and our relationships and all the other areas of our life as well. And so that's why we're talking about this today.
Okay, so Scott Fitzgerald, the author of The Great Gatsby and other works, said something in an interview, and it then became an essay. And he said that the mark of a great mind is the ability to hold in mind two conflicting ideas and still be able to function normally. So, in other words, it's possible to look at two ideas that are both true and that conflict with one another nonetheless. And perhaps the best example that comes to my mind, just from the world of physics, is that they're in trying to understand what light is. There is a very simple experiment whereby you shine a beam from your flashlight at a mirror, and you'll notice that if you do that in a dark room, the reflection of the beam will bounce off the mirror to the wall behind you at exactly the same angle it would had it been a tennis ball you threw at the wall.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had one of those tennis practice devices that hurl tennis balls at you, and you point that at a wall, and you turn it on, and it just starts shooting a sequence like a machine gun for tennis balls, um, the angle at which the balls will bounce off is absolutely predictable. It'll bounce off at an angle equal to the vertical as the angle at which it hit the wall in the first place. Now, that's exactly how light behaves. And from that, we can conclude that light is a beam of tiny particles called photons, just like little miniature tennis balls. And if they hit your eye, they stimulate what we know as vision. And if they hit a mirror, they'll bounce off just like tennis balls would bounce off a wall. So here we have a very simple, unarguable truth, is that light is a beam of photons. But then if we actually split the beam of light with a half mirror and make one section of it travel a half a wavelength more distance to the wall, instead of getting a bright spot where the two light beams converge, we'll actually get darkness. Because what happens is that, as everybody knows, light is actually a sequence of waves. And so if the peak of one wave hits the wall exactly the moment where a trough of another wave hits the wall, they cancel each other out. And so you get this astonishing thing, which the first time you see it, it's really quite amazing. And that is these two beams of light strike a wall, and instead of getting a doubly bright spot, you get darkness. So from that, we arrive at the unarguable truth that light is actually a wave. And but I thought we just said it's an arguable truth that light's a stream of particles. And the answer is, yeah, you're right. Well, wait a sec. Is it particles or is it a wave? Yes, that's right. It's both. And this remains, to this day, it remains one of the most challenging mysteries for the physicist to wrap his brain around. It's really very, very difficult. And although this was known before the beginning of the 20th century, it wasn't until 20th century physics arrived that began to give us a little bit of a clue about how to deal with this dichotomy. Anyway, that's by way of an example. And so
Rabbi, as you're bringing up, go ahead.
One unarguable truth is that you can never have too much money, period. You can't. Because we're human beings, you will always find something to do with the money. It's not as if, let's imagine with no change to your lifestyle, the income that would come pouring into you keeps doubling every month. Can you honestly tell me there's a time at which you're like, stop, too much, I don't know what to do with it? No, you're never going to say that. Nobody is. But at exactly the same time, it's also an unarguable truth that it's not going to pour in with no change to your lifestyle. And it does require an investment of time and energy and skill and sometimes dignity if necessary in order to attain that flow of money. And now it begins impinging on other parts of your life. So at one and the same time, it's true to say that there is no limit to the money you should make, and I'll come to that in a moment. At the same time, there is a limit to how much of your life you should devote to that. And that's what I think we're going to pause out and arrive at a solution that people can actually use in their lives.
Yes. And I think, Rabbi, this is a fascinating conversation because, like light being two things, money is often understood, right? I mean, money is not something that in and of itself is something even to be desired. It really is this means of exchange between one person providing value and another person certifying that value has been received. And so when you look at money from a perspective of what actually is this thing that we end up valuing, well, I get it from serving other people in a way that they receive a tremendous benefit and they give it to me because I served them. And now I have something, this tangible thing that I can now exchange with someone else for something that I want more than I want those dollars that are in my hand, and I give them away to somebody else. And so we're in a constant state of exchange of money. It doesn't just sit, and it's not intrinsically valuable. It's valuable because we have attached some meaning to it, because we have had some kind of value that we've exchanged with someone else, and we're going to exchange some value in the future. And that's why it is meaningful to us. And yet at the same time, we have this very strange position that we stand in where you can say you do always want more, but how do you live in a position of abundance and being satisfied, but not giving up, not cutting the, there's a word I'm looking for, but not giving up and settling on your ability to produce that value for others, not stepping away from that realistic challenge and this calling, this responsibility that we have really to serve other people and to provide them with something of value. So we don't want to give up on that. We don't want to give up on our dreams. We don't want to give up on creating more opportunity for our family and being able to have the things that would suit them best and help develop them most. And yet at the same time, we know that pursuing money endlessly can lead to just a futile life and somebody who's unhappy and depressed and always just selfish and greedy, and all of these negative emotional attributes come out of that. And so what's really interesting is you are saying the number one question is, how do we recognize that we never can have enough money, but we don't want to dedicate our life, too much of our life, to the pursuit of money. We also don't want to crave it and long after it. So, Bruce, I'd love to hear your thoughts as we're really unpacking this dialogue that I think affects people of every single economic level.
Yeah, I believe, I mean, you're right. Every economic level. It could be the single mom that has five children trying to figure out the balance between, actually taking care of them at home and then actually, doing some work so that she can give them something else. Or the high paid executive that's making $25 million a year, but is never home to take care of family and so on and so forth. And then I think what Rabbi is saying is, there's nothing wrong with either one of those things. You just have to recognize what you're doing in that process. We can all justify certain things. We say, well, I'm going to do this at the detriment of that right now, but in the long run, the average will be pretty good for us. I think the big thing is I've always found is communication is lacking in those particular. Why are you doing this when you talk to your family members? Why am I pursuing this going forward? To explain that it's not that I'm not here for you right now that because I think any less of you, but I believe this is better for us in the long run. I think that's the thing that I've seen with people that are trying to struggle with the pursuit of money and also their other balances in life is they never communicate what they're doing or why they're doing it.
Yeah. So, Rabbi, let's go ahead and dive into that idea of how do you know that you're not dedicating too much of your physical capabilities, your mental energy, and your personal resources to making money?
Well, let's keep these two streams of thought separate for just a little bit longer before we try and integrate them. And so let's start with the money question of everybody, even the person making 25 million a year in the corner office, or the single mom with a few children. Everybody is very happy to get more money. Let's acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. And that's not a bad thing. And one of the most important principles, and as you know, several of my books are devoted to increasing income. Books like Thou Shalt Prosper, the 10 Commandments for Making Money. And one of the most important of those, now they're all important, but one of the most important is to recognize that we human beings are motivated in different ways. And so, for instance, somebody, and again, most ordinary people will do far more to save the lives of their children than they would necessarily even for themselves. Mm-hmm. And so that would be an example of how we're motivated. There are numerous accounts, and again, I talk to people in military service all the time, and people have experienced. There are people who've actually experienced and witnessed acts of extraordinary selflessness. Mm-hmm. The guy throwing himself on the grenade that's about to go off inside the Humvee that a terrorist tossed through the port. And many other, that's, a common example, but there are many other examples. And over and over again, people will say to me, look, I got to tell you, of all the guys in our platoon, that was not the guy I ever thought would be that selfless. And so all that means is that up till that point, the guy's primary motivation in most things he did were for himself. And he just was never driven to do a whole lot. But as soon as somebody else could be the recipient of his act, all of a sudden he was inspired to extraordinary bravery. It is
Well, I
also
think that does happen with money as well. And I can see the parallels so closely because it's a noble thing to be able to have the resources to provide excellent opportunity for your kids. It just is.
very much so. And this is
And
one of
it's,
the reasons that other than a few outliers, particularly in the last generation or so, of young single people who've exploded with meteoric effectiveness financially, particularly through high tech and financial tech, but ordinarily throughout certainly throughout United States economic history, people with children outperform people without. The overwhelming majority of top performing people in the C-suites of the Fortune 500 list, all married and with family, and most of them married to the same woman, one marriage. This is just a reality. That's the statistical fact, and it's not a mystery.
Fascinating.
It's
it's the way that it's intended to be, and yet you're saying that it's also the way that works most effectively, which is really awesome.
It certainly does. And look, I've had friends, that I was friends with in high school and later, who were into extreme sports. And I must say, I recall being tempted. The going through the phase of jumping out of airplanes with parachutes, and from there onwards, all kinds of things, almost without exception. When they had children, they stopped doing those things. Why? They like doing them. Up till then, somebody would say, hey, do you know you're risking your life? And the answer would be a devil may care grin and, oh, who cares? So what? What'll be will be. Well, fine. So you got kids now. What'll be will be. No, doesn't work that way. Because now I'm caring about somebody else. It's different. People in the insurance industry, and I'm sure you know a few, will tell you that it's very tough to get single guys to buy life insurance. As soon as they get married, it's a little easier, but wait till they have kids, and that's when you can sell insurance. It's caring about other people. Now, the point I'm making is that as long as you, and I'm speaking to our audience, if you are in the desire of making more money, then obviously knowing how to drive yourself more effectively will produce more. As a matter of fact, one of the things we're talking about here is how do you make more money without using up more of your life energy and more of your lifetime? So obviously, you got to work smarter, not harder. One of the ways of doing that is intensifying the motivation. Well, how do you do that? It's really simple. Like most effective things in life, it's not necessarily easy, but it is simple. And the way this works is, as long as I am going to work on Monday morning in order to make more money because I want to buy a vacation home, or because I want to have enough money to take a 2-month vacation, or whatever. All of these are selfish motivations, and good luck. There's no reason why you shouldn't succeed, but it will take more energy and more time than it needs to. Because if you would change your motivation around to the point where you get a thrill out of serving other human beings. I speak of them as God's other children, but some people are comfortable with that notation and some are not. To me, I find that very energizing, because I'm not just taking care of, somebody else. And I've consulted for, funnily enough, in the last little while, for three veterinary doctors who run veterinary hospitals. And they came to me because they were feeling very dissatisfied with their business and with their work. And one of them shared with me some statistics that there's really disturbing suicide rates among veterinary doctors. And I want to tell you the answer I gave to all three. Now, it's not a case of just giving an answer. I had to help them absorb the answer into the very fiber of their being able to really wrap their souls around this fundamental truth. And that is, the reason you are not doing well and the reason that you are feeling anxious and unhappy and maybe even depressed is because you are seeing your patient or your client as the horse or the cow or the dog or the cat. We human beings derive very little deep psychic satisfaction. We get some, looking after a pet is not without its rewards, but nothing compared to looking after a human being. You've got to adjust your thinking, Mr. Veterinary Surgeon, to start recognizing that your patient, if you like, or your client, if you like, is not the animal, it's the owner. You're
fascinating.
You're not serving the animal. The animal is a possession of the owner. This is a harsh and tough reality, particularly for pet lovers. And yes, I do. I feel a need to sort of validate myself here, but I actually, when my kids were a little younger, I used to take them to farms in order to actually come up close to animals. And even now, I do programs quite often for folks in Mennonite and Amish business groups in Pennsylvania and elsewhere. And they have the most beautiful farms. I go out of my way. And I for instance, I like being around cows and I like being around horses. But I don't confuse that with being around people. And so as soon as, and this worked beautifully for all three, and it took about six weeks in some cases, a little more, 2 months, 2.5 months, to help them wrap themselves around, to really change their perspective and utterly modify their attitudes here, re-engineer their thinking completely. They realized that they were paying very little attention to the person who brought the animal in or the farmer who owned the cow. They were focused entirely on the agonies that this poor animal was suffering, and rightly so. That's their job. They got to deal with that. But the person they're pleasing is the human being.
I think that's really clear connection to this idea that if you are in work that you're called to do, it's more than just a profession or an occupation to I teach. Well, I'm passionate about the math that I teach, or I mean, you parse it out really very well with talking about being a veterinarian, but any position cannot just be about the income or the paycheck, or I'm just clocking time to be able to get that paycheck. But when you really look at it as a calling to be able to serve the people around you, even if you are not owning your own business and you're in a position of having a job and you're serving the boss, you're serving the customers of that company, you're serving your fellow employees, the teammates of the company. When you're in a position that you are serving other people, this is a calling that you are fulfilling by doing an excellent job and doing the best that you can and improving that work. Then it's not really a matter of, well, should I stop doing my calling? Should I just be content and say, well, I guess the world doesn't need me anymore. Let me just, be done with pursuing that calling and instead just say, well, I have enough. I don't need any more money to have in my hand. So therefore I'm going to stop doing this thing that I'm called to do. And I think what you're saying is the service is extremely important. And I know you would agree because I've read your book, and especially the chapter on not retiring in Thou Shalt Prosper.
Very good. I was going to ask you if you remembered what the 10th in the
Never
10th
retire.
never retire. Well,
Yes.
why never retire? Look, it's something I try and do whenever I'm talking to. This happens most commonly with teachers, but also with doctors and occasionally with lawyers. And I always say to them, hey, have you ever received any letters from grateful clients or grateful students if you're a teacher? And invariably, they will turn around, and if they're in their office, they'll pull open a file and pull out a sheaf of letters. And some of them are dated like 10 years, 20 years earlier. And well, look, you got paid for that client. Why are you keeping this letter? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You got paid for teaching. Why are you keeping these letters from students? We all do that. If we're
Well,
lucky
because the
enough to
real
get letters,
reward, the
if
real
we
reward was what happened between people.
yes, the fact that what I did meant something to that person is hugely valuable to me. Hugely valuable. Yes, I got paid, but this shows that the underlying deepest satisfaction and likewise the deepest motivation is pleasing other people. And that's exactly why I believe it's immoral to retire. And if it's April time and in the United States and you're sort of getting your shoebox of receipts ready for your accountant, and you walk into the accountant's office and you notice there's nothing on his desk and some of the furniture is missing and he's standing there in his golfing outfit and there's no secretary or receptionist, you go, oh, what's going on here? I've brought my receipts. I always bring them to you, April the 11th, here I am, 4 days before tax time. I bring you all my paper. And he smiled. He said, didn't you get the letter? We sent the letter out to the whole practice. I'm retired. What's my response? I'll tell you what it is. How dare you? For all these years, we've had a business relationship. All these years. Why on earth are you abandoning me? This throws into disrepute our entire relationship going back all the years. Means all along you were just doing this till you had enough money so you could take your ball and go home and play golf. I thought you cared. Mm-hmm. And if you cared, how dare you retire? What's changed? That's how, if somebody retires, it shows that they weren't doing it for the people. They were doing it for the money. And one of the huge differences between people who make money and people who don't, there are several, but one of the big ones is, do you work for your employer and do you work for the money, or do you work for the people? That's the big difference. And so the most important lesson to convey to people who are trying to make more money with less time is start taking pleasure, a thrill, a real deep delight in how you improve the lives of the people you serve. And I don't care what field you're in, as long as you don't work for the government, but in almost any other field, you can learn to take delight in your customers, in your clients, in pleasing them. And as soon as you wrap yourself around that, not just with your head, because that part's easy, but travel 13 inches south to your heart, and you can wrap yourself around it spiritually and in your soul and in your mind and in your heart, your whole psychology gets wrapped around this idea that it's really good to serve other people. It's fun. Everything changes. You will be operating on a more advanced level of motivation. Can't fail. So
what's really interesting about that is two things that I would like to ask you about. So one is that in order to go from a position of wherever you are to making more money, you need to grow, right? You need to think of more ways to develop your potential, better strategies to serve more people, leveraged ways of doing things rather than just trading time for money. And that pursuit of growth then causes you to develop your potential. And as you're talking about, it's thrilling to be able to serve other people. isn't that the person that you want to be then, so that you are thriving in all these other areas? Because let's just face it, if you are working for the sake of just making more money, and then you're coming home thinking about the more money that you didn't make, and that's why you're home now and you're frustrated about the money that you're not making because you're not at the job, you're not going to be the kind of person who is the mother or the father to your children, or the husband or wife to your spouse, that you really want to be in that circle anyways, because you're carrying over that selfishness. But instead, if you become that person that you're talking about, being thrilled to provide that service and choosing that growth path, which is frankly very uncomfortable most of the time, you're always continuing to become better. And that is a position where now you're in abundance and you're a better person to be around, and you're actually going to be thriving in the other areas of life as well. Is that correct?
No, it's exactly right. And we all have what I call a spiritual schematic. A spiritual schematic is the invisible part of us, that part inside. We don't always necessarily always recognize our own spiritual schematic. And sometimes one of the things that good therapists do is help you become conscious of your own spiritual schematic. Sometimes they speak of it as a sort of film running in your mind, or whatever it is, but I call it a spiritual schematic, and you've got to become aware of it, and then more importantly, you've got to learn how to modify it. And one of the most obvious distinctions in spiritual schematics, some people have a spiritual schematic of abundance, and some people have a spiritual schematic of shortage. And I've seen this in my own work quite often, where somebody is talking to me about increasing the effectiveness and the profitability of their business. And I analyze things and I go through things, and it becomes obvious to me that they have a shortcoming in marketing. And whether you're marketing a book or a widget or a car or anything else, a lot of people think that 95% of it is the quality of the product and 5% of it is the marketing. And I'm not going to say the percentages are exactly reversed, but I will say that a majority of the success in most cases is going to be the marketing, not the product.
Who would agree with you is Russell Brunson, who created ClickFunnels. I'm not sure if you know that name.
I do not.
We follow him and his work and his podcast, and he said something very close to the effect of, until you become obsessed with marketing, your business will always continue to suffer.
Yeah, that's right. Well, more than one time I've had a client say to me, when I introduce them to somebody like him, somebody who is a master of marketing, he is so initially excited. The person is amazing. And then his next instinct, which he's almost embarrassed to share with me, is, but wait, I'm not going to be able to cope with all the customers or clients that's going to bring me. That's a spiritual schematic of shortage. They are not equipped to think spiritually in terms of vastness.
Bruce, I know you're thinking about Dan Sullivan and the ceiling of complexity, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. There are a lot of people who really mastered that. Art Williams was an insurance guy, A.L. Williams, and he really got that. He was an insurance sales professional, and then he just saw limitlessness. He had a spiritual schematic of abundance. Some people are just born with it; they just get it. But a spiritual schematic of shortage is much more common, and that actually takes work to overcome, as you said. So that's really important. And then
that was what I was going to ask, because it seems like there's an innate in certain people. They're either abundant or scarcity, and so then is it nature or nurture? And can you nurture that out of them?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. And obviously, the sooner you do it,
the better it is. Yeah,
the better it is.
For sure.
I get this all the time with my clients. They're They want to retire, and I always say to them, well, why do you want to retire? Well, there's always two answers to that question. One is I I don't know. I just thought I was supposed to be retiring, or I can't stand my job anymore. I just want to do something else. And I say, well, if you can eliminate everything you don't like about your job, would you retire? And they're like, well, wait a minute, but I can't do that. No, no, no. Let me ask you this question again. If you could eliminate everything you don't like about your job, would you retire? Let's say you could do it. And it really, they go back in their chair. They don't know how to answer that question because we have a society and a government that are so fixated on retirement.
Yes.
That is the goal. I mean, retirement was a government construct in 1935. And instead of the government in 1935 saying, we're going to try to figure out how to grow the economy so that we can have more jobs, they say, let's get out the old people and get the new people in. That's how we're going to solve this problem. So people don't think about the fact that I actually play golf as much as I can. And inevitably people ask me what I do. And they ask me, when are you going to retire? And I say to them, I don't think I'm going to ever retire. And they are just amazed that I'm a financial advisor and I don't have the desire to retire. It doesn't make any sense to them. Why? Because society is inundated with this idea of retirement. That's the euphoria that you will reach,
Well,
not the actual service.
Even if it's not just something out there on the news and in the media, you have to look at the circle of people that you're spending time with. And honestly, if you are in a circle that every single person is talking about their retirement date and their retirement party, well, that's just the way you're going to think. And if your mom retired and your dad retired and that's your normal,
I agree with you entirely.
It's
and
hard
Rachel,
to come
that's
out
the
of
same
that.
reason married couples should absolutely not hang out with divorced people.
Yeah.
Absolutely shouldn't really. I mean, it's devastating when a couple is friendly with another couple, the couple gets divorced. And firstly, they got to decide who they're going to stay friends with, because you can't stay friends with both. That's devastating. But then comes the realization that you're actually, sad as it is, sorry to tell you, but you actually shouldn't hang out with either of them. You really should hang out with people who are like-minded, trying to do exactly what you're doing. And so, yes, I got to tell you, when I find myself at a dinner party or a dinner event, and the table is filled with retired people, I catch Susan's eye and I say, we got to get out of here. I can't take this, because I know that in very short order, the conversation is going to turn to medical ailments. I really don't want to hear it. I really don't want to hear what your doctor said or what happened to you the last time you went to see your I don't want to hear it. And I don't want to hear any more about your golf game. So yeah, I'm afraid that is a reality. So,
Rabbi, if I may, the idea then of, I mean, I think, Bruce, you were bringing up a really valuable point about this idea that it seems like some people just have the abundance gene almost. But what is really interesting is that I see people who've come from amazing families where the culture of their family growing up was such that they were taught abundance on a regular basis because of the language and the training and the tools that those children were given. What are they going to give their kids? Well, they're going to give them that same valuable, positive way of looking at the world. And I can tell you that if anybody consciously recognizes, I am coming from a position of scarcity, I am coming from a negative mindset and a negative viewpoint, you can do a lot of things to get out of that. You can change who you're listening to. You can change your circle. You can change your your choice on the words that you say. You can hold your spouse accountable. You can have your spouse hold you accountable to the words that come out of your mouth. And you can change the culture of your surroundings. And then all the people who are listening to you will be impacted by your conscious choice to change that culture. So I think choosing to become an abundance-minded person, that the world is big enough.
Look,
There's always
like
more than
most
enough.
things, there's an expression in ancient Jewish wisdom that the imprisoned person can't free himself. You need a collaborator on the outside to help get you out. Somebody's got to fly a helicopter into the prison yard and haul you out. You can't do it yourself, and it's a reality. You know, we're talking about escaping a scarcity mindset and replacing it with an abundance mindset. It's really a lot easier with a good coach, a good helper. I mean, the key word is good. It's got to be somebody who understands what you're trying to do and can help you. But in all of these things, I can't stress how valuable it is to, you know, it's the same as not trying to waste your time doing your taxes yourself. You know, I love car engines, but believe me, I do not spend time trying to fix my own car engine. It just doesn't make sense. It makes more sense to hire specialists, people who can do those things better. And so it is. Gaining an abundance mindset really much easier if somebody helps you do it. You know, learning how to work for people, not for the money, how to find a thrill in serving other human beings. It's much easier with somebody else helping you. And I just recently had the same experience. You know, we relocated, and I was trying to figure out how to lay out my office, and my head just started spinning, you know. And eventually I actually went online, and I found there are people who specialize in organizing home offices. And I found, I tried one person, wasn't a good match. We parted company. And the next person was a woman who was absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing. Paid her a lot of money, and it was the money really, really well spent. I enjoyed paying her because she changed my life. It was, you know, so it's worth bearing in mind. And then we come to the second stream of the discussion, because we've been talking mostly about you know, why making money is good and how you can increase your effectiveness at making money, get rid of a scarcity mindset, learn to thrill at serving people, not abstract ideas, but for people. The money comes by itself. All you got to do is try to figure out how to make a person's life better, and you're home free. And you got to enjoy doing it. So all of these things are crucial. But now, how's about spending too much time on that? And here I have no option but to reluctantly and self-servingly promote our newest book.
I'll help you. I think I have the right one. I'm pretty sure it is. There we go.
Exactly. Now, this again, it's a huge help when you realize that there's not an infinite number of different directions in which your life is being pulled. There are only 5.
Mm-hmm.
Family.
Do you want me to say them? I know
No,
them. We've taught our kids. Yes.
Yeah, right. Well,
so there's faith, there's family, there's finances, there's fitness, and friendships.
Exactly. So yeah, that's exactly. So all my relationships that have to do with family, and if I'm a single person, then the person whom I'm dating fits into that category, because it is everything having to do with intimate relationships. And so the Thanksgiving table only is filled with a boisterous crowd of uncles and aunts and cousins because grandpa and grandma had a relationship. So family is quite wide. And finances, well, finances is that vacation home of yours, and it's the gardener or the person or the agent who looks after it while you're away, and it's your money, and it's your possessions, and it's the clients you serve, and it's the bank manager that advances your line of credit, all the relationships that have to do with finance. And then we've got friendships. Now, friendships are all those relationships that are neither family nor finance. So if I belong to a political organization, let's say I'm a Second Amendment enthusiast, and I'm part of a gun owners club. Okay, that falls under friendships. Everything that's not, all human relationships that are not financial or family are friendships. And so here we've covered a huge slice: your social life, your family life, and your financial life. And then is your faith, and the other thing is your physical fitness. So those are the 5 things, and you have to do a regular audit. Some people do a daily audit, some people do a monthly audit. I do a weekly audit. For me personally, a month is too long to let something slide. I don't want the possibility of 30 days to go by without me realizing that I'm neglecting something important. I'd like to know that soon. A daily audit is a little too arduous for me. So for me personally, I do a weekly audit. Before my week begins, usually Saturday night, I set aside an hour to run through my 5 Fs. How did it go last week? What do I have to focus on this week? And this way, it's very easy to see whether you are spending too much time on finances and not enough time on family, or not enough time on friendships, or maybe physical fitness. And then you can immediately modify it for the forthcoming week. But then you say, but I can't help it. I've got to keep doing this. I've got a lot. I really need the money. Okay, well, then now's a really good time to change working harder to working smarter, in changing your motivation, changing the way you function, making sure that you're not wasting a lot of your time doing your own taxes or fixing your own car engine, for example. And so, yeah, I think that really squares the circle, as it were. That takes our 2 conflicting ideas and reconciles them. At one and the same time, I am not putting any limit on the money I want to make. No limit at all, because I do not want a spiritual schematic of scarcity. No, I want a spiritual schematic of abundance. No limit. But that doesn't mean I'm going to devote my time and my energy with no limit, because I got 4 other things I got to be mindful of.
I love that you're talking about doing a regular inventory, because you're not saying, am I doing too much of this thing? You're saying, is anything else suffering? Are my relationships in my family, are they suffering? Have I devoted enough time to that? Have I bettered my spiritual life? Have I been growing in the word? Have I been dedicating myself to prayer and to learning the word and understanding the word and worship? And am I in a position that I'm taking care of my body and my health and my fitness? Am I actually exercising? Am I keeping this body that I've been given in the best possible condition so that I can be the best benefit in all these other areas? And you're saying, if I look at every single one of those and I take a pulse and it says there is a problem here, wherever you recognize there's a problem, that means you probably need some more time and attention and resources mentally dedicated to that area.
Guys, if I were to tell you that in my life, my professional life as a consultant or a coach, which would you guess I find most? There's one category where I've had most people coming to me. They are spending too much of their time and energy on one of these 5 Fs. Do you have a guess which one it is?
Finance. What I guess.
It can't be faith. It can't be,
Family.
I don't know. Well, I don't think it could be family. I would guess finance or fitness.
Well, fitness is number 3, finance is number 2, and faith is number 1 in my experience. Now, again, I tend not exclusively, but more than half of my clients are religious people of faith. So, yes, oddly enough, but I'm interested why you said it can't be faith, Rachel.
It seems that most people are not spending, I guess, maybe the circles that I'm aware of. I would say in general, those in evangelical Christian church might be going to church, but not necessarily having the dedicated time to developing spiritual disciplines in their own life and teaching their children and being in the word and spending time in prayer. And I would say it's usually an area that's lacking in most.
Yeah. And oddly enough, in a number of my clients who are evangelical Christians, I don't you see, part of it is that on some deep and perhaps subconscious level, going back to that spiritual schematic, what they're saying is God will decide how much money I should have.
Mm.
And
I've heard that one too, yes.
And that is not correct. God is deciding on a certain level, but he's not putting a limit on that, because the money you make is directly a function of how well you serve his other children. So, and so that's an area that I've had to help people correct with a great deal. There is a tendency to neglect the finance side from the point of view of, it's unseemly for me to spend too much concern on that, because in fact, I have to just, serve God faithfully and everything else fall into place. No, that's not exactly how the world really works.
Absolutely. I just recognized the time as you had your alarm go off. So I apologize.
No,
No
problem.
I lost track of time. I'm going to try to wrap this to a close in the next couple minutes, but you said something really powerful, that there's an order and a system that we need to follow in order to get the result. And even if you are someone who believes in God, yes, he's not just ordaining for you that you're going to have a certain amount of money. I heard it said by Vodi Bakum. I was listening to a sermon by him this morning, and he was talking about, if you are the farmer with corn, you can't just say, well, God wants me to have corn. Well, there's a process of tilling the ground and planting the seed that produces the corn, and God cooperates with that. But that's the order that he laid out. And so you have to do the steps in order to get the fruit. So it's the same in finance. So I hope that this episode was helpful for you in unpacking why we said the abundance paradox is that enough is never enough. You shouldn't just say, I have enough money. I don't need to focus any more attention on making money because that's a worldly pursuit or that's a selfish pursuit. Instead, you need to have a correct perspective of money so that you can truly serve people and you can have the steps lined up in the right order so that you can truly create wealth and you can be in a position of enjoying your life and being a well-rounded, holistic person as well. So I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to plug your book. So go to youneedarabbi.com. I'm sure it's there. Is that correct?
It is. And tell me, does a certain large international online seller of books advertise on your show?
Not necessarily, no.
No.
But that's okay.
Well, then I'm not.
That's okay.
I'm not giving them any free plugs.
Okay.
But yes, the book, it's a really useful book in terms of not only balancing your life, but working out how to make sure that the time you spend on family actually helps finance, and how the time you spend on friendships actually helps family, and how all of these 5 F's integrate with one another. So The Holistic You is a terrific book and very, very useful, I believe.
Well, like all the other books you've written, fantastic and extremely useful and very valuable. So go get The Holistic You. I will recommend, if you have not got Thou Shall Prosper, look up that book and grab that as well. It will transform your life and you're thinking about money. So we've talked about a lot of those concepts today. We did not have any questions come in during the live stream, but if you do have questions after the show, we'd love to see you put those into the chat. Or I guess that would be the comment section of wherever you're watching, so that we have more information to be able to discuss on a future show with Rabbi, because we love to bring him back onto the Money Advantage podcast. One of the videos we first did with you has now almost reached 800,000 views on YouTube.
Oh,
so
lovely.
We're thankful for
Wow, that's great.
That level of interest in talking about these topics. I will say one more thing, and it is that, as Rabbi, you were talking about not doing everything yourself. Wealth also is a team sport. And if you are in a position where you are looking to make sure you're optimizing your financial life, don't try to do that alone. You can come to us at the Money Advantage and we can help you look at your financial life and figure out how you can make it better.
Yeah.
So you can do
Yeah,
that at
you're exactly right.
themoneyadvantage.com. Awesome. Well, Rabbi, it has been such a pleasure to have you today. Tell Susan we said hi. Thank you so
I
much
will,
for
Rachel,
joining us on
and
the
thank
show.
you. And Bruce, thank you for having me back. I appreciate it. It's always wonderful. Time passes, and it's such a surprise when I look at the clock and see how long we've been talking.
Awesome.
Yeah,
well,
thank you for your time.
If you've been listening today, thank you for tuning in. And in closing, remember, success leaves clues. So model the successful few, not the crowd, and build a life and business